Okay, 5.6a, inverse trig functions. This beginning part is going to be some pre-calc. All right, so we are going to talk about inverse trig from pre-calc days to get us warmed up for when we do the calculus in the second half. All right, the first thing, that's what arc sine is. Okay, but remember, arc sine is always between negative pi over 2 and pi over 2. Okay, I always thought about it in the fourth and the first quadrant, remember? Remember me doing that last year with you guys? And so that's how you think of that one. Arc cosine is between 0 and pi. And so that would be that range. So think of it like the first and the second quadrant. And arc tangent, that one's very well behaved, but it still goes from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. All right, so that fourth and that first quadrant. And then we still have the other arcs as well. They don't come up as much. All right, let's do it. Here we go. So again, this is our unit circle practice basically. So we have arc sine of negative 1/2. So what we want to think about is when does sine equal negative 1/2? But we have to think about that range that it can be. So when can sine be negative 1/2? At what value of our unit circle can that happen? 7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. True that. However, neither one of those is on my range from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. So which one is it? It's kind of on 11 pi over 6. It's on that range, but I can't say it's 11 pi over 6 because it goes past pi over 2. It's negative pi over 6. All right. Remember doing that a little bit last year? All right. It's going to come up again. All right, so let's look at part B. So this one's arc cosine of 0, but the way I want you to read it is, when does cosine equal 0? So when does cosine equal 0? At pi over 2. All right. It's also 3 pi over 2, but again, it's not on that range from 0 to pi. Remember that? All right, so we can just say pi over 2 on that one. All right, let's look at part C. So now we have arc tangent of square root 3. So when does tangent equal square root 3? I'd think about this as like square root 3 over 2 over 1/2 if I were you. How do you think of tangent? It's what? Pi over x. So when does this happen? At what? At pi over 3. All right. Happens right dark. All right. Let's look at this next one. Arc cosecant of negative square root 2. So when does cosecant give me negative square root 2? It's basically when arc cosine or arc sine of what? Negative square root 2 over 2. That's really what's happening. So when does sine equal negative square root 2 over 2? 5 pi over 4 and 7 pi over 4, but both of those is not between negative pi over 2 and pi over 2. So we'd have to call this one what? Negative pi over 4. All right. Remember that from last year? All right. All right, a little bit more of the pre-calc again. Remember inverse functions? So if I arc sine something and I sine it, those are inverses of each other. Kind of like squaring and square rooting, those are inverses, it's multiply, divide. But we always have to be aware of those ranges that can occur. So let's look at this first one. The first one we have is arc tangent of 2x minus 3. The quantity of is equal to pi over 4. So how do I get to the x? How do I get to my variable? I tangent both sides, exactly. And so when I tangent both sides, I'm left with what on the left? 2x minus 3. And now we get to evaluate the tangent of pi over 4. And thank goodness we know our unit circle still. So when is the tangent of pi over 4? 1. And so now we do a little bit of simple math. We add 3 divided by 2. X equals what? 2. X equals 2. All right. All right. And these were those ones that I loved last year. So we have sine of arc tangent of 3/4. And so on these guys, remember we drew out that triangle? Where we drew out the triangle? All right. So we're going to draw out our triangle. So we have arc tangent of 3/4. So we need to figure out when tangent is equal to 3/4. Well, what's tangent? Oh, yeah. So what's that? Opposite over adjacent. So my opposite is what? 3. My adjacent is 4. So that means my hypotenuse is going to be what? 5. All right. So now that I have that triangle, now all I have to do is evaluate sine on it. Remember doing these last year?
Yep.
All right. So what's the sine of that guy? 3/5. And then we don't. All right. Let's do one more, and then I'm going to set you free on the other 2. So we have tangent of arc cosine of square root 2 over 2. Yes, this is on the unit circle. However, we'll just draw a triangle to do it this way. All right. But this one is actually easier than it needs to be. All right. So arc cosine. So what is cosine again? Adjacent. So now I have square root 2 there, and my hypotenuse is 2 right there. Well, what's my other side? Square root 2 as well. So now that I have my triangle, now I evaluate with tangent. So what's the tangent of it?
1.
Just 1. All right. That one we could do with our unit circle. What's the arc cosine of square root 2 over 2?
Pi over 4.
Pi over 4. And then the tangent of pi over 4 is
1.
1. All right. I'd like you to do C and D. On C, I have arc sine of 1/3. So when does sine equal 1/3? My opposite would be 1. My hypotenuse would be 3. So then my other side is what? Square root 8. And so now once I have my triangle, I do the secant of it. What's a secant?
3 square root 8.
Aha. So now we have what? 3 over square root 8. You can rationalize it, so we'd end up with what? 3 square root 8 over 8. And if you really felt like it, you could simplify that radical. What could actually come out? A 2. And so then we'd end up with a 6 square root 2 over 8. So then that could actually simplify to 3 square root 2 over 4. If you really wanted to. But more often than not, we're actually allowed to do that part in calculus right there. All right, let's look at part D. So now I have cotangent of arc cosine of -2/5. Now, I personally like to draw my triangle backwards on this one. All right, because what is cosine?
Negative.
It's a negative. So truly, that's in the second quadrant because it's going negative. It's not going to give you a wrong answer if you draw it going to the right, but I personally think it needs to go to the left. Just saying. All right, and so then what's my other side? Square root of 21. All right, so then we need to find the cotangent of it. And what's cotangent? Hey-oh, so what do we got? -2 over square root 21. If we wanted to rationalize, we'd have -2 square root 21 over 21. All right, pretty good in the hood?
How do we know it's not a negative square root?
So now we're into the ones with variables, and this is really where we need to be for our next lesson that is going to involve calculus. It will tie in. So now we have cosine of arc sine of x. And so I want to make my triangles, but now I have variables going on. So what is sine? What's sine? Opposite over hypotenuse. So my opposite is what? X. What's my hypotenuse? 1. Remember, if you like it, put a 1 under it. All right. And so then what's my other side? Square root of what? My hypotenuse squared, which is 1 minus my adjacent, or my other side squared, which is x squared. All right. So now I have that going on. So now that I have that triangle, what do I need to evaluate? The cosine of it. So the cosine of it is square root of 1 minus x squared over 1, which normally we don't need to put the 1. All right, I want to do C first. So on C, I have sine of arc cosine of 2x. Sine of arc cosine of 2x. So let's draw out our triangle. So what's cosine? Adjacent over hypotenuse. So my adjacent is 2x. My hypotenuse is 1. So then what's my other side? It's the square root of what's my hypotenuse? 1 minus 4x squared. Very good. I hate it when I have students that say 2x squared. I'm like, no, it's the quantity of 2x squared. So it's 4x squared. So now that we have that triangle, what would be the sine of that triangle?
Square root 1 minus 4x squared.
All right. Are we good? All right. I'd like you to do B and D. Here we go. Tangent of arc cosine. So we need to draw our triangle. Let's do it. So cosine's what? Adjacent over hypotenuse. So what's my other side? What's my square root of 1 minus x squared? And so then my tangent is what? Over x. We good? All right, let's do the next one. So now I have sine of arc tangent of 3x. So then when I draw out my little triangle, what's my opposite? 3x. What's my adjacent? 1. So what is my hypotenuse? Square root of what?
9x squared plus 1.
Or 1 plus 9x
I
squared.
like it that way. I know. It's the samesies. Commutative property happens. I get it. All right, so then what?
It's 3x over square root of 1 plus.
And then what do we kind of need to do? We rationalize it so it's 3x, and then square root of 1 plus 9x squared over 1 plus 9x squared, and we done. Good, good? All right. All right, your homework is page 379, numbers 5 through 34 and 37 through 40. It won't take you very long at all.